To preface this, I briefly read this webcomic called The Watch back in 2006, in which one of the protagonists is a big fan of redheads. At one point, he tells a djinn that if all girls' hair were red, that would just kill the actual appeal. Only lately, I have been noticing how mostly limited extras' hair in anime usually is to brown and black, with even a little Snow Fairy Sugar, which takes place in Germany, treating blonde as mostly fantastical, despite how notorious that country once was for promoting blonde as the Aryan hair color. That show does have the occasional blonde, redhead, or technicolor, but that's still not the same thing as an even distribution between blonde, black, brown, and maybe red, even if technicolor here would be reserved more strictly for fairies. Even in Lucky Star, where almost all the main characters and their families have technicolor hair, you would think that that would be treated as some kind of world building. Well, what can I say? Extras, by definition, are not the ones you normally pay attention to. Brown only stood out to me, partly because of all the technicolor-haired characters that anime has to offer in the first place, and outside of anime, by how often blonde is the go-to color for sex appeal. Naturally, I assumed that almost everyone would share the same palette in a given show, barring more fantastical discrepancies. That started to change when I first looked up Another's character page on TV Tropes. However, while that show features blonde on dolls, artifacts designed to resemble human beings in its OP, and an even broader palette in the show proper, Say I Love You featured no such exceptions. But if anything's really weird, that would be when I noticed a whole coven of witches in I've been killing slimes for 300 years and maxed out my level, all brown or black, despite being no less magical than Blonde Witch Azusa herself, just not as experienced. Part of what fueled my original misunderstanding, though, was this shot of Montcoli Knights, featuring a second green-haired girl to Rokuna, way back in 2005, predating even Mai and Ellen's long-term roles in anything later each that year. I've mentioned a party of other kids the other day that I once planned for Mondo and Rokuna to join, and the reason this scene stood out when I finally refound the show itself on DVD, after it ended on Fox Kids a few years earlier, is because I had originally planned for Technicolor hair to exist mostly in Rokumon Seikai, with a special explanation reserved for Mondo and Rokuna. Over half the kids they were to join were specifically based on kids I once knew, at least superficially, in real life. But anyway, I was told that the reason fantastical hair colors exist to begin with, including blonde and red in Japan, has mainly to do with making important characters stand out from everyone else. Google Gemini specifies this as proof of brown on Protagonists et al., as often a curated decision instead of a default. I am aware of a trope called World of Technicolor Hair, but some of the anime examples there also have entries on a contradictory trope called Flashy Protagonists, Bland Extras. And on Reddit, several people have recommended some different shows to me, and while Shiki is out for having a 2-1 male-female lead group, Ascendants of a Bookworm would be my first choice out of the remaining. I would also commission for extra heavy scenes for any ebooks I intend to publish to Amazon and promote on Deviantart, and only there due to subject matter. I had already commissioned those to be set in Japan so as to feel like an anime in the same way as a light novel, mainly for myself, for even before commissioning actual images. I also had hair and even eye color included in some greater scope biographies for one of those for that same purpose. However, that still doesn't change the fact that my attraction to brunette girls was all based on a misconception. How does one deal with such a realization?